new season of Beyond the Hedges. I'm your host, David Mansouri. Today, we're exploring a topic that is reshaping classrooms around the world: digital learning and artificial intelligence. Specifically, how is the landscape of higher education changing with the emergence of new tools and new approaches? Here to guide us through that conversation is Shawn Miller. Shawn is Rice's Associate Provost for Digital Learning and Strategy, the person charged with leading the university's vision for digital education. Prior to joining Rice in 2023, Shawn was at Duke University, where he was the Associate Vice Provost and Chief of Staff for Learning Innovation. From online courses to AI-powered learning tools, his office is at the forefront of defining what the future of a Rice education will look like. Shawn, it's great to have you with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right,
Uh,
so to start off, Shawn, could you tell us a little bit about your professional journey? How did you find your way to Rice? And maybe more importantly, how did you find your way into the world of digital learning and education technology?
yeah, I'm trying to get better at telling this story. I was a first gen college student. I used to not mention that as much, but it seems like it's significant in my story. So I ended up going to the University of Texas at El Paso. I grew up in El Paso. Um, didn't really know that there was other opportunities, but I knew I had to be the first in my family to go to college. That was always a goal for everyone, right? In my family, it's like you're gonna make it. You're gonna go to college, and so that's what I did. And when I went to UTEP, it's UTEP's a huge campus, and a lot of commuter education happens there. You don't really live on campus, right? But I also ended up finding a job there with what they were calling a digital media center. And so this is like right at the dawn of sort of the broader internet, right? I'm gonna make myself like I'm gonna reveal my age. Um, and so we were doing things like creating websites for faculty because no one knew how to create websites yet, and doing things like coding Macromedia Director CD-ROMs that were interactive for teaching and learning. So early ed tech stuff in that sort of web versus like multimedia space.
Hmm.
And so I started doing that as a job. I'd always been kind of leaning into technical things, but I was actually going to school for creative writing and English literature, right?
Hmm.
And I thought my goal was to be to be English faculty at some point, right? And I always thought that that was going to be my trajectory. But on the side, I did all this like design and web stuff and sort of little more techie things, right?
Hmm.
And so, I ended up working at UTEP, ended up getting offered a job there after I graduated, to manage a team. I knew nothing about doing that, right? Uh, Ended up helping them launch their first learning management system that they ever had. Ended up working on early online programs there, created something called the Hybrid Academy that helped faculty navigate how to teach in hybrid ways, taught some hybrid courses myself. And then along that trajectory, I entered a PhD program and ended up dropping out of it and going to take a job at Duke. Uh, I had a friend challenge me, a very good friend at UTEP challenged me to think beyond sort of my vision for what I had for myself, right?
Hmm.
I started scanning around, and I ended up getting a job at Duke. Kind of started over in some ways, but then you worked my way up at Duke to become director of what was then called the Center for Instructional Technology, uh, which we grew from an ed tech unit to basically being like the de facto teaching and learning center for Duke.
Hmm.
And so along the way, I gained all these other perspectives about pedagogy and innovating in pedagogy. And I probably had no right to be a director of that type of center, but it was something that ended up happening, right? And I ended up taking on the role for many years. And then over time, we ended up adding an online dimension, which I already had some previous expertise in. And that's like when the MOOC thing hit, right? Coursera, edX. It's about 10 or 12 years ago when massive open online courses were going to revolutionize everything. So we added that capacity. And along that way, me and my colleague, Matthew Raskoff, who's now at Stanford, created something called learning innovation at Duke, which was bringing together that ed tech piece, that teaching and learning piece, the online learning piece, and adding a research around teaching and learning capacity to it, and creating putting all four of those things together and then seeing what we could do to create a vision for really like lifelong learning across the whole journey that someone might have, right?
Hmm.
So like pre-college to post-career, how can a university serve all of those needs, right? And of course, along the way of doing all that, we ended up in the middle of a pandemic, and my team helped Duke Kunshan University. Duke had a university in China. We helped them move uh, totally online in a series of weeks before the rest of the U.S. even knew that a pandemic might shut them down. And then a few weeks later, we were brought into the provost office and asked if we could do it all over again. And there we were. And so for a few years, that's mostly what my team did. We ended up winning a presidential award at Duke for it, and uh, over time, that's basically what played out. And then I ended up having some really good friends in the industry tell me to take the look at this job at Rice. Very interesting things happening with the leadership at Rice, right? And at first, I thought I'm not going to go back to Texas. Like I lived in El Paso. I drove to Houston many times. My memory of Houston was not that great. But I visited Rice and I just fell in love with the people. People at Rice talk about a community of care. And it's just one of the things I tell people that's surprising is that like Rice um, actually turned like things that they said when I was interviewing for the job turned out to be true, right?
Mm.
There's a community of care. The leadership's awesome. We're really engaged in making this a better place, making this an amazing space. We really care about our students, all that stuff. So, um, I've come to like Houston quite a bit too.
Mm. That's awesome. Great.
Yeah,
Thanks
yeah,
for sharing that journey.
sure.
That's amazing. So I want to pick up where you just left off and ask you to share what the vision for digital learning is at a place like Rice, and how has that vision evolved over time, right? You gave some examples of this, like we can all sort of think of things like Coursera or other courses that
Yeah.
are available online, but we also know that that's like rapidly shifting and changing. So, how's the vision for digital learning changed, and what would you say is the university's really philosophy around how Rice is thinking about digital education?
Yeah. Yeah. So many folks listening to this might not realize that Rice has been involved in digital education for a long time. Um, so Rice has sort of an interesting legacy
Mm.
um, that I was keenly aware of when I took the job. But I've come to find that a lot of folks who even work at Rice aren't really aware of it, right? And
Mm.
it's not too unusual. This happened to me at Duke too. At Duke, I would say things like, "We have 10 million learners in Coursera," and people would be like, "What's that?" Um, so so it's not unusual, but, um, 10, 12 years ago, Rice started making, arrangements to partner with groups like edX and Coursera to offer massive open online courses to the world. The reason a lot of institutions did that was to open the door to the university, to get our faculty, acclimated to the world of online learning, to gain experience and expertise, help build up our own teams. Rice quickly moved from that to offering fully online master's programs.
Mm.
We have 4 online master's programs right now, online MBA, and then 3 online degrees in engineering. Um, so Rice had been no stranger to that. Rice also has OpenStax, which many people are maybe familiar with, but OpenStax outside of Rice is absolutely the premier open education resource company, right? They have a great reputation. They work with tons of people, do really great work. So digital education is sort of part of the Rice fabric, whether we like it or not, right?
Mm.
And I think it's interesting though to think about the different audiences that Rice serves. So at our creamy center in our core, it's the undergraduate experience, right?
Right.
But then Rice has almost, if not more, I actually should check on the stat, graduate students who maybe want something different from the institution than that. And graduate students, I think you could slice them into 2 categories, right? You have professional learners that are looking to like upskill, and you have people that are on their way to a PhD or looking to really join the scholarship community.
Right.
And then outside of that, you have lifelong learners. I think on both ends of that spectrum, Rice does a lot in pre-college, but we also do a lot in professional education and post-career stuff, right? Um, and I guess the question is, could we do more? And if we did more, how? And so traditionally, online learning and digital education have played a role in those spaces more than the undergraduate experience. And the question is always like, how do you make digital education relevant and useful for the undergraduate experience
Sure.
too, right? That always seems like everyone's goal. To me, that's not exactly like the main goal. The main goal is to figure out how the university serves all of those purposes using digital tools. But anyway, to speed this along, I when I got to Rice, we needed to cast a new vision for what digital education was, and part of my mandate was to think of to answer the question, how can digital education really be something that applies to all aspects of Rice, not just one of those. And so we decided to, over time, to rebrand. So the unit I inherited when I got to Rice was called Rice Online or Rice Online Learning. We rebranded as Digital Learning and Strategy. Uh, so we're digital.rice.edu now. And the reason we did that is we decided to cast a vision for seeing digital learning as part of every Rice learning experience,
Mm,
right? And the idea is that we would look at digital learning through a few different lenses. One is improving access and equity and impact, right?
mm,
So how do we get more people accessing things at Rice? How we get more tools in the hands of people? How are we making sure that everyone has the um, same abilities? How do we enable more dynamic teaching? I think this might come back in our conversation a little bit, and I'm sure you think this too, David. But
sure.
educational technology, like one part of it, isn't really that the technology does something, but it gets us to rethink something that we do in our teaching, right?
Sure.
So how does it do that? How do we connect learners? I think a place like Rice, it's really about faculty and student interaction, but it's also about peer to peer. And so, how do we use technology to create more communities, create more meaningful relationships, not sort of shuffle us away from that?
Mm, mm,
How do we extend our abilities? This is one I added on right at the end of that rebrand because I think AI, one of the questions I'd like to keep asking when we think about AI is how do we extend our abilities to do more than we've ever done? Not how do we like offset something and be so like a lot of
right.
people are really concerned about laziness and cognitive rot,
Sure.
right? But I think maybe the answer for AI is not what can you have the AI do that you used to do as much as what can I do even more of or even
Mm,
better, right?
mm,
And I think that's a good mindset for us to be in education.
mm,
And then, of course, like digital education helps us increase Rice's reach and impact. We have a mission to serve Houston, but also the world now, right? And how are we doing that? How are we exposing more of the world to what Rice has to offer in a way that doesn't maybe tax everyone completely in their time and effort, right?
yeah. So, Sean, I want to ask you for maybe a couple of examples, right? So, you talked about students who are on campus, maybe undergraduate students. Like, give us an example or two of how a current undergraduate student at Rice might interact with or use digital learning tools. And then,
Yeah,
and then on the flip side, right? Like if I'm a student at Rice that's not on campus and I'm somebody who's taking online master's degree program, or even someone who's not a student, right? Like,
right.
and I'm, or a full-time student, right? Like
Yeah,
how would I be interacting with the digital learning tools that you and your team are creating? So anyway, give us a
sure,
couple of examples in each of
sure.
those scenarios.
Um, one one example that might not be obvious to people who haven't done a lot of digital education is that sometimes we help faculty make these online courses where they're meant to be primarily sort of on demand. So we're doing like really high production video, we're doing really intentional instructional design. And then those faculty, if they teach on campus, they end up using that with their students,
Mm,
right? And
interesting.
so this
Yeah.
is in my world, like we call this flipping the class, right? But
Right.
but it's basically like giving students access to materials and learning
Yep.
experiences ahead of time, and then you
Yep.
spend the last time really doubling down on that person to person
Sure.
interaction, right?
Yeah.
And I think like that's the one of the best primary uses of how we reuse those things,
Yeah.
right? So that's an obvious one.
Yeah.
Um, Another one that undergrads will eventually experience is as we delve more into AI tools, they'll have more access to those too. And I think in some ways they'll be used for this too, right? Like we'll end up having assignments where students need to go and engage with the AI to learn XYZ, but that in order to prepare them to have better conversations or do better projects, project work in class, right?
Mm,
So I
mm.
think in an institution like Rice with the residential experience at the undergrad core, that's really going to be sort of the sweet spot first,
Yeah, interesting.
right?
Mm,
For online students, they interact with all sorts of technologies, right? They're in Zoom, they're on Canvas. Canvas is our learning management system. They're taking quizzes, they're experiencing different tools depending on the subject of the course, right? So they're seeing a whole sea of things there. But there's also like a sea of things that happens underneath digital learning that doesn't directly interact with the student that we also are in charge of, like marketing courses, making sure student success things are in place, uh, checking in with people as their progress goes, right? All that stuff has to be there too.
interesting. And then you mentioned obviously the impact of COVID on your professional journey and the sort of quick, digital learning experience and fully online experience that you had to put in place, both for an university
Yeah.
outside the U.S. and then for Duke. And I wonder if there's anything that the experience of moving fully virtual during COVID taught you about digital learning in higher education, about what works, about what doesn't work. And I can think of some things that we've learned. I feel like even in the K-12 space around, we imagined that every student would no longer have a snow day ever again because they
Right.
would have the
Right.
ability to just immediately, move their learning to online learning. And that certainly has not happened. But I'd just be curious about what lessons you feel like the experience
Yeah.
of moving 100% online taught you about what works and what doesn't in higher education.
Yeah. I've got quite a bit to say about this. Like, feel free to cut this out. But like, I've been asked about this a few times. I even did a keynote on it for a conference that was at our campus in China at Duke. So I don't know if like my take is maybe the most popular, but I'll give it to you. I think you have two things that people tend to say about the pandemic digital learning experience. One is that it was horrible, and uh, they'd never want to do it again. And then for those who knew about online learning or had done it before the pandemic, they'll say, "Well, that's because no one did it right," quote unquote,
Mm, mm,
right?
mm, mm,
And I think like we can honor both of those viewpoints, but I also say that like we learned a few things, right? And
mm.
so one thing is most faculty learned how to use the LMS and Zoom. And if you think back pre-COVID, how many people could launch like a webinar and or call a virtual meeting, right? And how many staff did it take to set up like a global web conference? And it was incredibly expensive. It took a lot of time. You had to schedule it. And now people just trigger these things, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think the second thing we learned is that hybrid work can definitely work. Uh, and I've gone on record a few times saying that the future of work maybe parallels the future of hybrid and online learning. And I know there's a big return to office thing happening right now, but I think remote and hybrid work are still here to stay. And I think some people have not done it as successfully, but we definitely learned better ways to do it. And we also did a lot. There was a lot of research done over the pandemic about how effective people can be there. That is maybe not the same as with students, right?
Yeah.
But I can get to that. We did learn a lot. I guess third, I would say we learned how to be more student centered in our approaches. Uh, because before the pandemic, we knew like that we needed these pedagogies that focus more on student needs and identity and context. But then when the students are there in front of you and they're in their own rooms and they're having their own problems and their parents are sick and everything is just in your face, right? And so I think faculty and administration, not just at Rice, but as a whole in higher ed, we ended up really doubling down on the need for student well-being, care-centered, like, there's something called pedagogies of care that, like, arose out of the pandemic, right? And it comes from a place of, like, making sure that students' needs are, like, really met before we can even educate,
Yeah.
right? And I think the pandemic gave us a bigger focus on that, and I think that's also one of those things I hope we didn't lose as we started moving away from it.
Yeah.
Um, I guess the fourth thing is, like, accessibility. Uh, before the pandemic, it's no one wanted to, like, admit that you could just actually record all your lectures and transcribe them for people who needed it, but suddenly it became super easy, right?
Yeah.
Whoa, lo and behold, we can do that. And, so all of those accessibility things are still with us, and I think the demands are higher because we know what can be achieved now.
Mm.
Um, And then, I guess the last thing I'd say that I learned, and this is kind of a story from my time at Duke, but the things that I learned that students really missed, undergrads, I'm gonna say undergrads really missed during the pandemic weren't like about the classroom. It was about all the other things that being on campus like made it worthwhile, right? They missed their friends. They missed meeting up with their faculty at for coffee, right? They missed clubs and social gatherings. They missed hanging out in the library until 4 a.m. They missed going to Duke. They missed going to basketball games, right?
Mm, mm,
Um, so you had situations later where both the students and the faculty didn't really want to like go back to in-person classes,
mm,
but they all wanted to be on campus again,
yeah,
which was really interesting. I'm still kind of unpacking that in my head, but I think what it says is that the experience for the undergraduates, the experience of being in an institution is more, i- is the sum of it is more than like what you
yeah,
think. And focusing just on the classroom experience, just that like 1 hour and 90-minute teaching thing is not the whole of a person's experience as an undergraduate in that, right?
yeah.
I tend to focus on it a lot too because I'm trying to get faculty to innovate there. We're trying to help students get their needs met, but all the other things around it really matter, and that's what people really missed.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we've talked a lot about digital learning and the vision for digital learning and what that looks like at Rice, both for students on campus and students off campus. And I want to sort of switch to talking more specifically now about artificial intelligence and maybe just start with a bit of a broader question, which is, in your work, what's the sort of philosophy for how Rice is integrating new tools, new digital learning tools that are grounded in AI into its educational model? What does that look like? How do you think about that? How's the university thinking about that?
Yeah. One of the great things about the timing, no one probably thinks AI is the best timing. I mean, I know some of us are excited, but some of us are not excited because there's plenty of other things going on in the world, right? But uh, for Rice, I think the timing is very good because we are also in the middle of rolling out a new strategic plan,
Hmm.
right? And so the 10-year strategic plan, momentous, uh, fortuitously has responsible AI as listed as one of its main catalysts.
Mm,
And so we've used that to guide some of our thinking on how AI should um, move forward at Rice. And in that plan, there's an objective that suggests that Rice is going to lead responsible AI education.
mm,
And so we've been following some of those bullet points as part of our early roadmap, right? And
mm,
there are things in there like developing degree and certificate programs, which Rice just announced. We have a bachelor's of AI starting this semester, right? We're developing curricula that integrates responsible AI across different disciplines. We're thinking about an area of courses that like really rethinks AI across ethical, social dimensions, not just technical. And then we're also thinking about what kind of professional development we provide for our faculty to really get them up to speed on AI, right?
mm,
And so that's been guiding a lot of my thinking. We formed an AI advisory committee in 2024, and it's made up of faculty from each of the schools plus various stakeholders who are involved in AI. And we've been working around lately, working on really adding better detail and guidance around the common tenets of what responsible AI might mean for a group like Rice. And I think as that evolves, like it'll guide us even more. But I guess from an educational perspective, like I am interested in a few specific areas early on, right?
mm.
Um, Access is important. So going back to like what I said about access and digital education, like
Yeah.
we absolutely think that we need to provide at least a baseline of tools and options for our student staff and our faculty. And over the summer, Rice announced it's rolling out Google Gemini and Notebook LM for all of its faculty, staff, and students. That is not necessarily part of a play to just be a partner with Google and Google alone. It's more of a play to provide bare minimum access to good tools to
Yeah.
everybody so we can have that conversation and we can
Yeah.
also do it in a way that keeps the data somewhat safe and private, right? And then the second one is like moving towards this idea of AI fluency. I'm sure you've heard this, right?
Of
But
course. Yeah.
a lot of people talked about AI literacy early on, but I think we're starting to adopt this idea of fluency where it's really do we know enough about the tools to make critical decisions about when and when not to use them and when
Yeah.
to apply them, right? And I think getting that is like my high bar for like where we want our faculty and our students to get to in the next few years,
Yeah.
right? And then I've been thinking about how are we finding and closing gaps or improving outcomes, right? Like what's the advantage here? Like what can we do to really take whatever we've been doing now and make it better?
Mm.
And then how are we being responsible about that? Continuing to think about the data, privacy, ethics, the biases in AI, having more conversations about that. And then the big one, another big one for Rice, I think that will be a conversation for much longer is how do we take the best of what we do in like in personalized learning and figure out how to make it better and scale it,
Mm.
right? Which is like the golden goal for a lot of AI
Yeah.
companies as well, but also for institutions like ours where
Totally.
it's like, you know, we have like a 6-to-1 ratio in our undergraduate classes, right? It's pretty darn close to
Yeah.
personalized learning. So
Yeah.
how do we do that and then even scale it is a big one.
So to that point, Sean, what are one or two of the most promising applications of AI you're seeing in higher education that you're excited about? I mean, could be at Rice, could
Yeah.
be, things that you're seeing elsewhere. I mean, I'll just say things that I feel are like hugely valuable or, we're seeing uses of AI tools for tutoring, which provides, just very individualized student supports that, that are, without those tools are just really capacity constraining or even even things like giving students the ability to work with a chatbot that is trained on the syllabus and the
Right.
course materials, right, that are specific to that course. But yeah, I'd be interested in hearing what some promising applications you're seeing in the teaching and learning space.
Yeah, so like riffing on that personalized learning and going with what you're saying too, I do think we are exploring AI tutors, we are exploring chatbots, but we are thinking about it in a way that doesn't take away the personal connection between people.
Mm.
And there's actually an experiment happening right now where Rich Baranick, who runs OpenStax and is
Sure.
in engineering, he has a class running right now where he has some students thinking about how to help how AI could help our Oasis program, which is our peer tutoring, peer
Mm.
mentoring program at Rice, right? And it's a great program, right? We have peers, we have students who are trained in different subject areas who know a lot about a certain subject and they're trained in how to do tutoring and to really help their peers. Great program. What could AI help them do better uh, without removing them from it, right? Because we have the luxury of having peer tutors, right? Other schools maybe don't.
Right.
But what if we did both, right? And so Rich has some teams of students thinking about what those interventions might look like.
Mm.
I'm really interested in that piece. Like, what can we do that's not just throwing a tutor at someone,
Yeah.
but what is it around the edges that makes that a powerful thing, right? And then what is it that like doesn't take away the soul of like what we're doing, right?
Mm.
And so that's a big one. That I guess that like if I had to name two, I could talk about this a little bit, but we have some grant programs where we're getting faculty to explore different things, and I'm excited to see what kind of like purpose-built, discipline-specific tools and experiences come up from faculty, right?
Yeah.
Because I know there's things that I'm not thinking of because I have to think generally about this so much, right? There's got to be some really great uses, like some pedagogical innovations that they've never been
Right.
able to do before that this is going to enable, right? And in the past, we just had to do something that was less than,
Yeah.
right? I'm
Yeah.
excited about that. And I guess like the third thing I'll say is I'm excited about what AI could do underneath the hood to extract and analyze, continually like extract and analyze data. Because man, we've talked about learning analytics. There's this concept in educational technology, right? Learning analytics. Like how can we apply data to learning and learn more about things? And it's a good science, but it hasn't, in my mind, it hasn't yielded a ton of insight yet, right? But I think AI might take us to that next level where we start getting real time active insights on like what's working and what's not.
Mm.
And that could be really powerful, right?
Mm.
And so I have a lot of hope in that too. we'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah. To your second point, Sean, I feel like one of the uh, pieces of advice I got early on in this sort of exploring the way AI can be supportive of teaching and learning is figure out what the problem is that needs to be solved educationally first,
Yeah.
and then look for a solution that can help you solve that problem. And I think your point about um, putting faculty in a position to figure out what problems do they need solving, what are the things that they couldn't do before that AI could help them do, versus like, let me just take this AI tool and figure out how to plug it in
Right.
somewhere in the teaching and
Right.
learning experience. Anyway, that really resonates. That really resonates with me.
I mean, that's what's really most so frustrating to me about sort of the first wave of AI education tools that we got thrown at us, right? As institutions.
Mm.
And I'm talking even about startups. They're mostly founded on the idea that like whatever we were doing now in classes and now in teaching is somehow the right way to do it.
Right.
Right. So it's like, how can you speed up creating better multiple choice tests? Right.
Hmm.
Or how could you like grade all these papers that you've got to grade?
Yeah.
Like, well, maybe like the outcome for that class isn't that you should write a paper in the first place. Right. But
Mhm.
like now is our chance to ask that. And I know this is frustrating for faculty. I feel this. It's frustrating for me to like have to talk about it all the time too. But we are going to have to rethink those things, right?
Yeah.
But it's a good opportunity for us to. But then it's been frustrating to have all these ed tech ventures like come out
Yeah.
where it's like, but AI could make all the things better. And it's like, yeah, but you're talking about making traditional education like faster, cheaper, more productive. You're not
Mm.
talking about helping people learn better,
Yeah.
right?
Interesting.
And that's
Interesting.
like, I got to remind myself that too. Every time I see some cool thing,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, that is a cool thing. But like, that actually, that intervention never did anything for people in the first.
Yeah. Yeah. So, on the flip side, what keeps you up at night about AI and learning? As you're working in this space, what are some of the biggest challenges or ethical concerns you're focused on? Whether it's, you mentioned data, whether it's data privacy, or I'm sure, one of the first things that comes to people's mind when they think about this is academic integrity, right?
Yeah.
Or even, you mentioned this too, right? Accessibility of these kinds of tools for different kinds of students, right? Maybe students who have had different, backgrounds and may have not had experiences working with these tools in meaningful ways. So anyway, what keeps you up at night? What are some of the biggest challenges or concerns you're focused on?
I think maybe this doesn't keep me up as much as like it's a weekly frustration is just that there's so much advancement in this space and the not just the tools, but conversations about policy, the use cases. It's like a full-time job to like read and analyze and stay on top of this, right?
Mm.
And it's definitely part of my job. And I'm hiring a person to help with this actually, but even two of us aren't going to be able to do it, right? And I'm worried that because we're facing like that fire hose of innovation and tools, that we have no time to digest this and really make good decisions.
Mm.
And I actually have a good friend in the faculty here at Rice that um, part of his job, I think, in life is to be like a naysayer about these things, right? And he's poked back on me and said many times, maybe we're moving too fast. Maybe we shouldn't have like adopted Gemini. Maybe we should chill out and wait, right? And I don't think he's like wrong. But I also think we're not wrong to try to help Rice stay competitive,
Mm.
provide access to our students, and support our faculty and all of that, right?
Mm.
So it's a give and take there, and it feels like it's not a year-long negotiation anymore, it's a weekly negotiation. So that
Mm.
that could keep me up at night. And I guess the second thing I'd say is, higher ed has been struggling for a while to explain our real value to the world, right? But there's a new moment where it's even more important. And I like sometimes I give groups this thought exercise. I said, like now you can just go to ChatGPT and you can say, teach me something, right? What makes it different than what we do,
Mm.
right? And I'm not saying it does it better, and I'm not saying it does it worse. I'm just throwing that out there, right?
Mhm.
Because you know that there's a wave of students who will try that and make a decision for themselves about whether higher ed is for them or they can
Mm.
teach themselves, right?
Mm.
And so what are we telling students? What are we suggesting to the world that like we offer that makes us better value than that. And I think like there's definitely obvious things like the universities create new knowledge too, right? LLMs are really just regurgitating knowledge that exists, right? They're helping us maybe make new discoveries, but they're synthesizing knowledge that exists around it, right? But so we create new knowledge in the university. That's great. And it's great to have students be around that. That's part of the answer. And I think like then like issues like academic integrity though, and I think that this is going to be unpopular maybe answer, but I'm less worried about people cheating than I am about like that massive need to rethink teaching overall, right?
Mm,
And so I that does keep me up at night too. Like
yeah.
I don't have an answer. When I throw out that chat GPT situation where I said I did this in a meeting this week, I said, you could go to chat GPT and tell it to teach you computational economics, right?
Mm,
And my friend in economics, he definitely admitted that that is a possibility, right?
mm,
But he also went on to say that when he learned economics, he learned it on paper first, and then when he got a computer
yeah.
years later, he found himself accelerating what he could do by leaps and bounds, and he was amazed, right?
Mm,
And so he said, "Well, like, so the flip side of this is like, again, what more can you do than you could ever do before?"
yeah.
So I really like education. We're gonna have to double down on like helping students like really see potential.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but is that enough? Like, I keeps me up at night.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned one last question on AI. I mean, you mentioned the really maybe sharpening that the expansion of AI will require education institutions to have to do around the value proposition that they're bringing. But I also want to ask you about how you think about what skills students need to build to be successful when they leave, right? So as we know that obviously employers are becoming more and more focused on, skills-based hiring and what are the specific skills that students have. And so would love to hear your thoughts on, for students at Rice, what essential skills do students need to be building to thrive in an AI powered world? And how are the tools you're creating, the university is providing them, how's that helping them adapt?
Yeah. There's a stat I've been sharing. I don't have it on hand actually. Should have. That students that are going into the workforce realize that they need AI skills, quote unquote. I should put a footnote in that and come back to it. But they also realize that they need skills that we're giving them in a traditional undergraduate liberal arts education, right? Like we're giving them things like creativity, critical thinking, like the elusive things, creativity, critical thinking, knowing how to do deep research in something, knowing how to critically analyze, knowing how to partner with people and really collaborate. Those are still skills that show up in those job descriptions in addition to the AI stuff, right? I guess the other thing that I'm learning, having talked to a lot of industry partners lately, is that they don't exactly know exactly what AI skills they want either. And so I think we're in this interesting space right now where we are trying to figure out. So I think technically down to the skill level, it's hard to say. What we need to have is at least people that have familiarity with these things and know what's possible.
Mm,
But then we also need to be teaching people that there's an expertise that goes beyond that, where you learn that you don't always trust the AI, right? Or the AI outputs could be wrong, or like how to figure that out. And
yeah.
I think companies will still need people that can think creatively outside the box about that, help coordinate teams around that, and then also really understand the bigger picture. Like, what's the AI trying to
Yeah.
do? How are we doing that? Right. So I think I have been saying this for a while. I think institutions like Rice have a really good advantage because I think we're already teaching the right things
Yeah.
to our undergrads. But then the question for us is, what can we? I'm going to say bolt onto that. That's not a very sexy way of saying it, but like, what else can we bring into that? Right, that
Yeah.
gives them this new set of skills that doesn't take away from that core that we already have. Right,
Yeah.
because where else are you going to get that core? Right.
Mm,
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
LLMs aren't going to teach you how to collaborate with somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And if they do, it's gonna be, like, very polite and not acting to how to deal with a disagreement, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, all right. So last question about digital learning and
Okay.
and AI and the work that you're doing every day. So there's no one who knows more about how digital tools and artificial intelligence is playing out in a learning environment than you. So take us ahead 5 years and tell us about what the teaching and learning experience looks like at Rice 5 years from now as compared to today. Are we in a complete transformation and really the digital tools are at the fore and professors are just sort of coaches in the learning experience? Are these tools being used to accelerate teaching and learning, but the environment, what it looks like to learn at Rice still pretty much looks the same? Or
Yeah.
is this all just a fad, right? And we just go back to the way it's always been done.
Yeah.
Yeah, take us ahead 5 years. What's it
It's
gonna
not
look like?
like I definitely won't be a fad. I think people th- called people called out MOOCs for being a fad. And whether you think MOOCs really disrupted the world or not, every university does way more online than they did 10 years ago.
Mm, mm,
Every university has an online learning team that can build these things now. Every university has gained significant amount of faculty expertise in this. And most universities reach a population beyond their core that they did before the MOOCs. So MOOCs didn't fail necessarily. They just prodded something forward and we adapted and assimilated, right?
mm, mm.
I think the same will happen with AI. We just don't know how and when, right? So
Yeah.
we're going to be bumpy roads, but we're going to assimilate. But down 5 years in Rice, there's some things I could say that would maybe invite me back in 2 years, and we could
Mm.
talk about some things that we've got cooking. But I will say, I think there will be there's gonna be, like, more modularity, even at the undergraduate level. There'll be more hybrid experiences, even at the undergraduate level. Not maybe spending less time on campus, but less time passively sitting in classes,
Mm,
for sure. Also, some of the biggest changes will probably come in what AI does to the administrivia of the college experience. Like things will get infinitely better for students and staff in like the transactional stuff that like I'm not even involved in, right? Just like registering for classes, figuring out what your learning pathways are, getting your grades, all that stuff's going to be better and better by
yeah.
leaps and bounds at some point, right?
Mm,
Like all this stuff has been kind of a burden because the technology wasn't there and we needed some intelligence to sit in between that. Uh, but I think no doubt the student experience is going to change. Uh, I think it's still going to be at the undergraduate level. We're still going to keep it very personal, but we're just going to enable a lot more, right?
great. All right. So 2 years from now,
Well,
we'll check
we
in on
we've got some things
where we are.
cooking. Yeah, we've got some things
Yeah.
cooking that may or may not come to pass, but we're pretty excited about some
That's
ideas.
great.
Yeah,
That's awesome. That's awesome.
yeah.
Okay, so last part of our conversation today, and this is what we've done with every guest the last season or two is a few rapid fire questions.
All
So
right,
quick
all
responses here. So, what is your favorite spot on the Rice campus?
right. Yeah, I thought about this one because I knew that was coming. So it used to be Audrey's, which is a coffee shop in Jones School, and I'll tell you why. Like, some of my team is in the BRC building, which is sort of closer to some of downtown, and then I'm in the Allen building, and a part of my role is really being present at Rice, and so I would force myself to go to the Jones School for coffee, so I had to walk across campus at least once a day, right? No matter what I have going on, right? I just thought it was a great goal, so I started liking to go to Audrey's because I would run into people, connect with people. When I was new at Rice, is great, but then now the Jones School is under construction and temporarily closed, right? So then my second favorite spot is the local foods at Brockstein Pavilion in the middle of campus, and that's because, like, when I was at Duke, we had this coffee shop called The Perk that was built into our library,
Mm,
and it was just, like, this amazing crossroads of like, everyone went there at some point during the day, right? And so Brockstein feels very similar, like,
yeah,
if you're there, at some point, you're gonna get that crossroads experience, and that's why you work in a campus environment in the first place,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
that's in lieu of, like, some really cool answer, that's my answer.
That's great. All right. Second, what's the best book you've read in the last year?
Yeah, almost all of this won't surprise you, like, almost all of them are AI books. I was thinking, like, I think the one I've been quoting the most, though, is not about education specifically, but it's probably Super Agency by Reid Hoffman.
Mm.
I think the subtitle is something like "What could possibly go right with our AI feature."
Mm.
It's a very positive take. Um, I've been quoting it left and right, though. There's some really great examples he uses about other innovations. He has a whole thing about whether we should have tighter restrictions on AI that he kind of compares it with the early days of cars, right? Like
Mm.
first had motor vehicles, we didn't have stop signs, we didn't know we needed
Yeah.
them, right? We learned, right? And
Yeah.
like how that evolves. Very good. Like I really enjoyed that.
Okay, Super Agency. That's great by
Yeah,
Reid Hoffman. Awesome.
yeah,
Okay, and then the last question. So, as you may know, when a student applies to Rice as an undergraduate, there is a question on the application that is essentially the box. Everybody knows this is the box, where applicants share an image that is meaningful to them. So, if
yeah,
you were applying to Rice, what image would you put in your box?
yeah. I would probably put. I was thinking about this. I would probably put an a picture of an owl and a ladybug in it, and the reason for that is I have twin 6-year-olds, and those are like their spirit animals. And my wife and I adopted them as newborns 6 years ago, and Uh, I came to, like, parenthood sort of later in life, right? A lot of
Mhm.
my friends have, like, grown children, right?
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
they're talking about, like, which college are they going to, or where are they gonna get
Yeah.
their job, right?
Yeah.
And we've got 6-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
And we raised them during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
But it's been absolutely amazing, and it's, like, it is what people say it is, right? It's been a motivational factor for me. I see the world through a different lens now, right? All the stuff that people say,
That's
totally
awesome.
true, right?
That's great. That's awesome. Okay, so you've got 2, future owls at home,
Yeah.
too, which
Well,
is
so, like,
also
one of my daughters, Moxie, her owl is, like, what her thing was, and so when I came to
yeah,
work for Rice,
that's
it was
great.
hilarious. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Shawn, this has been such a fascinating, conversation and really interesting look into the future of learning at Rice. Really grateful for your perspectives and for sharing your insights in the work you're doing. Lots of interesting things ahead, and really grateful for your time today.
Thanks so much for the conversation, really enjoyed it.
All right. And to our listeners, just want to say thanks so much again for tuning in. To learn more about Rice's digital learning initiatives, as Shawn mentioned, you can visit digital.rice.edu and be sure to subscribe to Beyond the Hedges wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on social media and leave us a review as well. And we'll see you next time.